Okay, so let's see. We have a couple of people who are still stuck. We have a couple of people who are still working on Intro to Python 1. I talked to your TLs today in stand up, and they filled me in. They've Yes, this stuff is getting harder. This stuff is getting harder. You've probably heard about CS, that CS is tough. This is very intentional. We want you to learn how to solve problems, right? We want you to solve all different kinds of problems. We want you to be able to solve easy problems. We want you to be able to solve hard problems. We want you to be able to solve a very detailed, very specific, very particular problems. We want you to be able to solve vague, ambiguous, ill-defined problems. We want you to be able to solve any problem that you might ever possibly encounter under the sun. So to do that, we have to throw tough challenges at you, and our job is to support you in that. What I always like to say is, we want you to struggle. We're throwing you in the deep end of the pool, and we want you to struggle, right? We want you to thrash. We want you to flail. We want you to try different things, because that's how you get stronger. That's how you build up those muscles. Now, what we don't want you to do is, we don't want you to drown. So if that's a very fine line between the struggle and drowning, right? So if you feel like you're drowning, speak up. Definitely don't let yourself drown. We're here to support you. We want you to work, because it's through the work that you improve. But we also want to make sure that everyone doesn't feel like you're too overwhelmed. If you're feeling completely overwhelmed, talk to your TLs, talk to your SLs. We have people on student success. We have mental health support. We have a lot of technical support. So whatever you need to do, let us know. Communication is really key. Your first point of contact should be your TL. Your TL is the person who has the most amount of their time dedicated to you, and they together with your SLs and student success and student leadership, they will all work together to get you what you need to succeed. But as far as the actual work, you're going to need to do that yourself. Um, no one, if in order for you to get that job, you're going to need to have these skills, and your TL can't help you with that. I can't help you with that. That's on you. One other thing that I want to point out before we jump into the material is about professionalism. Now, this is a topic that I think at Lambda School we don't necessarily emphasize a lot, especially because it's all remote. It's a little bit harder to enforce. Uh, but things like showing up to your stand-ups, showing up to your one-on-ones, showing up on time to group meetings, these are really important skills for professionalism. And you are going to be professionals. You're going to be paid $50 an hour. That's almost $1 a minute. So $50 an hour is 100K for a salary. So if you're getting paid $50 an hour, and maybe if you're working in a warehouse and you're 10 minutes late, it's not a big deal, right? Well, we got to move all these boxes. Doesn't matter if I'm 10 minutes late. Like we still got to move them, right? This is different. This is different. Now you're in a group meeting. You have a variety of stakeholders, and if you're 10 minutes late to that, everybody's waiting for you. The CTO is waiting for you. The lead engineer is waiting for you. Everyone on your team is waiting for you, and that's not okay. You're wasting everybody's time, and that shows a lack of respect, a lack of professionalism, and it's just not okay. It's not acceptable for the salaries that you're going to be making. I know a lot of you have never worked in jobs like that, so this is why I'm not saying you're a bad person or anything like that. I'm not. If you were late to your stand up, or if you missed it for some reason without letting your TL know, that's it's fine. It's not fine, but just moving forward, it's just change it. Just don't let it happen again. And this is something you'll want to get in the habit of when you get to your jobs. Like, all the coding skills in the world are that's great. But if people don't want to work with you, if you're always late, if you don't do the things you say you'll do when you'll do them, then no one's going to want to work with you, right? Those of you who've been TLs or SLs, you know what this is like. You know how frustrating it is to try to start a meeting, and that one person is always, always, always late. And everybody's waiting in that room, and they show up like, oh, I just lost track of time. It's fine every now and then. It happens. It happens to me. But if it's habitual, then that's something you definitely want to check yourself and try to break that habit. before you get into your jobs. Because I can tell you this, a big part of your success, even if you're not the best coder, the person who shows up on time, the person who does what they say they'll do, the person who follows through, those are the people who are going to get ahead. Those are the people who the more senior developers are going to want to mentor when there's opportunities for promotion, for upward mobility. Those are the people who are going to be at the top of the list. Uh, so please keep that in mind. We know life happens. We know that being remote, it may feel like you're not really letting people down because it's just your computer, right? Like, who cares? It's just people on a screen. But there are human beings behind it. When you're late, people are waiting for you, even if you don't see them. So keep that in mind as you go through these meetings. Let's see. Can we go over CSV? CSV. Hold on. Let me drop this Slido in. Is this the right Slido? Yes. Okay. Can we go over CSV? Whatnot during today's lecture? Probably not. I don't think there's much to go over with CSV right now. We can talk a little bit about how you might parse a CSV file in plain text, but Julie, you might be looking ahead. So because of that, I'm not going to go too in depth. CSV is nice because CSV stands for comma separated values. So Python has a nice split command, which will let you split up lines by the commas, which can let you parse pretty easily. But there's also libraries for that, which you can look into. But again, Julie, I think you're looking ahead. So I'm going to save that. Maybe we can go over it next week if you still have a problem. And I'll be your instructor for next week as well with algorithms, so we can continue some of these questions as we into next week. House MD is not an accurate description of people who suck to work with but are good at their jobs. Yes, this is also a common stereotype with software engineers, that you say like, well, the best coders have the worst social skills, right? Because they are, I don't know, all of their brain power has been dedicated to coding. That's sometimes true, but it's like being the best coder does not make you the best teammate, does not make you the best software engineer on a team. In fact, it often makes you worse. It's like I said, if your code is so brilliant that nobody else can understand it, nobody likes working with you, nobody can communicate with you, then even if you're a good coder, it doesn't help the team, right? In fact, it hurts the team. It's terrible if every time there's a bug, you're the only person who can fix it. It just means that your plate is going to be overloaded. Bugs are not going to get fixed in a timely manner. The second you go on vacation, everything crashes and burns. So that's not something you want to do. And I don't think it's something you should aspire to either. Just from personal experience. The best people, the best engineers are fast, they write high quality code, and they're great communicators. Those are the three most important keys. It's okay if you're stronger in some than in others, but I would say the communication is one of the most important, more than the speed or the high quality code. Those things can be worked on, but communication, I think, is really tough if someone is not good at communication. Yes, be on time, be on time, be worth the dime. Yeah, let's take it. I'll take it. Okay, can you code it out for Slack in Python? Something simple with the slash command. Sure. If you get WebSockets up and running, you can totally code a chat app. That's going to be coming in Build Week. We have part of that task is to build a chat app in Flask or Django, which will let you explore the WebSocket technology if you are interested. But at the end of that, you can totally make a Slack clone in Python. Now, this is a executable, right? This is a web executable, so that's kind of a different thing. But if you want to do a chat app in a web interface, or if you're in iOS and you want to do it on mobile, that's totally possible. Spoken English has gotten worse since your time here at Lambda. This is something you can practice. This is something that you can practice. Practice your technical communication. A big part of CS is about technical communication. We talk about code readability, that's writing code that other people can read. We're going to talk about things like big O analysis, which is communicating with other people about the efficiency of your code. It's about discussing the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses of a particular bit of code. We're going to talk a lot about data structures and different tools that you can use for different problems. So all of this, it comes down to communication. All of this comes down to communication. Um, I would say, aside from problem solving, communication is the other big pillar of what we really try to get to in computer science. Like people think, oh, computer science is like queues and stacks and binary search trees and big O and things like that. Those are components of it, but those are just like pieces. Like the big overarching themes that we want to get to are first and foremost problem solving. Second is communication. Third is tools and techniques to solve a variety of like algorithm problems, to nail your coding interview, things like that. But the big pillars, the more important things that we hope you get to are those big picture, very general goals. By fast, you mean getting tasks done fast? Yes. So this is actually something that in my first job at Pixar, my boss, the head of my department, told me about this. He says when he's hiring engineers, there's three qualities he looks for. One is, are you fast? Second is, do you do high quality work? And third is, are you easy to work with? Right? Those three. Now, of those three, he says if he's going to hire someone, they need to have two. Obviously, three is better, but having someone who is strong in all three is very, 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 very rare, for a variety of reasons. And I've thought about that a lot since I had that job. Gosh, over 10 years now, over 10 years ago. Um, but it's true. Like if you're not that fast, make sure your code is high quality, okay, and make sure you're easy to work with. If you're not a great coder, if you make a lot of mistakes, at least get it done quickly, right? Don't take 2 weeks to do a simple task and then it's wrong. Get it done in a day or two. Be easy to work with so that when you get a code review, they'll tell you what's wrong, and you'll be able to make those changes quickly and you'll be okay. And the third iterate version of that is if you're very fast, if you write very, very high quality code, but you're kind of a jerk, or not even a jerk. Maybe your English is not that great and it's harder to communicate. For example, or maybe you just you're not really a great fit on the team. The vibe is wrong with the people, but your code is really solid. That can work too. But I would say out of those three, those people who are not easy to work with are probably, if I were hiring, that would be my least likely candidate to hire. But remember those three things. Try to figure out what your two are and figure out what your weakness is. For me, I've always been pretty fast, and I like to think I'm pretty easy to work with. But my code, it wasn't the highest quality, especially for the first 10 years of my career. But later, I studied more computer science, and like I almost failed out of college. I have a computer science degree, but I was exploring a lot of different things, doing a lot of other activities. So I barely graduated, and I didn't really learn CS that well the first time, and my code quality suffered. But later, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I went back to finally start studying CS in depth, and my coding got so much better. So where the quality of my code was once a weakness, now I actually think it's one of my strengths. Um, Being more careful makes me a little bit slower. I'm a little bit older, so I'm a little bit slower too. I no longer pound rock stars and monster energy drinks, but I think overall, I've become a much better coder, right? So just because something is your weakness doesn't mean it's always going to be your weakness. It's something you can work on. If you only have one of those things, maybe you're easy to work with, but you're slow and your code is not always the best. Pick one of those at least to work on. It's and I think you'll find yourself benefiting from that. The other takeaway is that you don't need to be perfect in order to get hired. You don't need to be the perfect coder with every single thing, getting perfect complexity and readability in all of your whiteboard challenges. You don't need to do that. Like, you don't have to be perfect. But it is important that you have your strengths and that you can share those strengths. And that's, things like showing up on time. It doesn't take any talent to show up on time. So that's why I really want to emphasize that. Being where you are, where you say you will, that takes no talent whatsoever. It just takes doing it, right? It takes being conscientious. It takes caring about punctuality. So I hope to see all of you do that. I know some of you have kids, and kids are tough. Some of you have side jobs or other commitments that make it difficult. But at the very least, you can communicate, right? Tell your TL, hey, sorry, I'm running late. My kid is sick. He wouldn't get dressed for school, so I might be late. That's totally fine, and I think your TLs will all be okay with that. What the worst is if you sign up for like a one-on-one slot and you just don't show up, and your TL is just sitting there for 10 minutes in the Zoom by themselves. Like that's not okay at all. Okay, let's see. Um, okay, this is a good chat. I think hopefully there's some stuff that you can get from it. But you're all adults. You're all adults here. We're not going to get on you too much. Like you're now that you're an adult, you take responsibility for your own actions. Your goal is to get yourself hired. Our TLs, our SLs, they want to get hired too, but they're we're all responsible for our own actions. And I hope you take pride in that. Your reputation means a lot, even within Lambda School, and your actions define your reputation. So if you want to have a good reputation, which will follow you along through your whole career, the contacts you meet in Lambda School, many of you're going to find job opportunities through that network. So care about your reputation. That's what I think. I don't care that much about my public reputation. I think a lot of people think I'm whatever, but my professional reputation I do really 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 care about, and I will work. I will do whatever it takes to make sure that my professional reputation stays sterling. So that's something I think that's helped out. Like when I didn't have jobs, that's helped me get freelance work. That's helped me find other jobs, right? Getting recommendations, getting those warm leads. So care about it. Care about it. It's hard. It can be hard to do it, but consistency is key. And if you haven't been that conscientious, start now. Like it's never too late. It's never too late to start. Just be on time from now on, right? That's my advice for you all. Yeah, very 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 relevant as well. I love that. It makes me laugh. Um, Okay. Yeah, Desiree, don't I mean it's okay to feel bad, but just again, moving forward, I think that we can all have a short memory. As long as you're good from here on out, I think we'll all be good. This is week 1 of CS, right? Intro to Python. Get it all out of your system now, because it's only going to get harder from here. Like I can tell you that it's only going to get harder from here. You think learning Python in 2 days is tough? Wait till we get to algorithms next week. We're gonna have a lot of fun. Okay, let's go to Slido. Are we off on Monday? Calendar is clear. Yes, we are off on Monday. There will be an official announcement at some point. I hope. I assume. But yes, we are off on Monday. I think since you're all in CS, you've probably been through a few Monday holidays already. And the way this works is that you'll be watching a video. So we will be providing a video from a prior cohort. I actually think CS24 fell on Veterans Day last cohort. So maybe we're going to give you CS23. I'm not sure. We'll find some previous lecture for you to watch. We'll give that to you on Friday, so you can watch it Friday afternoon. You have a few hours after your one-on-one, and we want you to take a break. We do want you to take a break. I'm not saying you need to work over the weekend. We don't want you to work on your Monday vacation, but the material, we're not giving you less material, right? You're still responsible for all the same assignments. We wouldn't want you to say, I never learned how to do an insertion sort because we had a holiday, right? Insertion sort doesn't care. about your holidays. The knowledge is the important thing. But yes, there's no instruction. I'll probably be on Slack if you have questions. But officially we are off on Monday. Okay. I need to clear out some of these old ones. I think these are from yesterday. Bit confused by the starter code on today's project. We will be going through this today. I want to do a brief I wouldn't say solution code, but an example of how I might set up the REPL. Sort of similar to how we did the rock paper scissors one. So that should help this. Have I read Refactoring by Martin Fowler? I have not, but it sounds like a great book. Sounds like a great book just from the title. If you want to drop into Slack, if you think it's a good resource, I'm sure some of us would love to share in that as well. Intro to Python 1, last exercise involved classes, which we covered that. Algorithm with animals, they say none on the speak method. I think we covered that as well. Back to the buildings. Mr. Okay, cool. So I think we're good on Slido. So let's see. If we scroll back up to this, we have some people, 4% are stuck, 4% haven't hit here. 20% of the class of 84, that seems pretty substantial, are behind but making progress. What I want to, maybe it's here. What I want to ask you is what are you finding tricky? What is confusing you? What's blocking you? What's giving you trouble with this assignment? If there's any specific topics we can go over. Could be more dry, project, awesome. Yes, okay, so I think we got all of them. But question. I don't know, do we need to make this anonymous? Are people feeling shy? I see nobody. All right, one person is typing. Maybe we can make an anonymous thread or have people add to this. But what do you think is challenging about this? Is it more the Python? Is it the fact that you're using a language that you only learned a few days ago? Is it this idea of object-oriented programming, these new concepts that are giving you trouble? Is it just having like a big project with lots of white empty files that you need to fill out and you're not really sure how to structure it? Is it time management? Like what are the things that are blocking you, for those who are feeling blocked? Okay, let's see. Main thing for everyone might be navigation or movement in the REPL. We can definitely go over that. Syntax, yes. So syntax is it's going to be very tough for the first few iterations, especially if you're used to JavaScript or Swift. Python is pretty different. No semicolons, no like a for loops look completely different. It can be a change, especially if JavaScript was your first language or Swift was your first language. It can be a big transition. My advice for that would be to follow the Ooper framework. And before you start coding, write out your plan, especially if your Python it's not even rusty now, right? It's just not even developed. Write out the plan first. Write it out in plain English. Say first I'm going to create the REPL loop. Then I'm going to read the command. Then I'm going to check if the command matches any of these directions. If it does, then I'm going to pass this to a move method, right? That's all just plain English. And then once you do that, the code shouldn't be too bad. Then it's sort of like what you did for week 1, right? Where you can say, okay, now all I need to do is do a loop that loops forever. That's just going to be while true : easy, right? Or if not easy, you can look it up pretty easily. And as you do that repetition, it'll get faster and faster and faster. But don't forget the problem-solving framework. I hear from students. One of my former TLs actually, he said, the whole time I was a student, and you were giving us the problem-solving framework, I never really followed it. He was really smart as well. He's like, I never really followed it because I never needed to. You know, I just jumped in and I did the code and it was fine. But he said once he got into a job interview and he had a difficult problem and he got stuck, but he said, then I just finally used it and it worked. I used the problem solving framework and it worked. And then now that I'm a TL, I use a problem solving framework all the time. And I can't believe I didn't use it before. Like it's one of those things that this is why I'm going to repeat it. Brian is going to repeat it. We're going to repeat it over and over and over and over and over again in hopes that at the end of these 8 weeks, it'll be embedded in the back of your mind. But the problem solving framework really works. It really, 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 really works. It's not just something we teach because it's part of some curriculum or Common Core or anything. Like the problem solving framework really works. I use it in my daily life. I use it for, we have some problems that we're trying to solve in Lambda School. And we, especially in the CS team, we all use the problem solving framework for pretty much everything. So if you're stuck, always go back to the problem solving framework. If you're confused, what's your plan? Think about your plan. If you don't have a plan, go back to understanding the problem. If you don't understand the problem, ask a question. There should always be room to move forward. Okay, let's see. I see a lot of stuff going by in Slack. All of the above. I know what I want to happen, but trouble knowing how to connect things syntactically. Okay, these are good problems to have. I'm going to bring up this link again. How to ask good coding questions that get answers. Because Chris, I think what you're pointing out, this is a really, really, really great place to ask a question. Now, if we scroll to this overview, structure of a great question is it's specific, it's clear and concise, and it shows you've put work into it. And of all these, I think number 3 is one of the most important to me. It shows you've put work into it. So if where I lost it. Okay, I don't know what here we go. So if you've gone through step 1, if you've understood the problem, you've read all the docs, you know what you need to do, you have a good understanding, you come up with a plan. And Chris, it sounds like that's where you are. Okay, I have a plan. I know what I want to do. You write it out in comments, and you fill out what you can, right? You can fill in the REPL from the rock, paper, scissors example. Maybe you set up some basic things in your room class to take the title and description, but now you're having trouble connecting them. This is a really good place to ask for help. Message your TL, say, hey, I've got a good plan. I've written out in comments. I'm just a little bit confused how to connect my player class to the REPL loop, right? Here's what I've got so far. That's a really good place to ask a question. And then your TL can jump in. They know you've done a lot of the pre-work, and they can help you very quickly, probably in a couple of minutes, rather than, okay, did you Google this? No. Okay, did you read the problem? Okay, we have to read the problem together. Okay, did you look at this? This is from lecture, right? You should know how to do this from lecture. And that's not a good waste. That's not a good use of time. And the TL, especially in the help channel, is going to be less likely to reach out and give you support. So follow these guidelines before you ask your questions, and you'll have a much, much, much higher success rate. Hours in a day. Yeah, I know. I hear that. If we had more time, I think that would benefit everybody. But you know what? I know you can do it. I know you can do it. It's gonna take all the grits, everything you've got. But I know you can do it. And again, it's that struggle, right? It's that struggle that's going to build up those coding muscles. That's going to make you a stronger developer. That's going to help you get ahead. Like once you get your foot in that door, once you get into the industry, it is that grit. It is that struggling through adversity that's going to help you to thrive and to rise up the ranks through your coding career. Thinking smaller components holds you up. Is this too small to be a component, or complicating things? I think my advice for that would be to start from, like, when you're coming up with your plan, start from the big picture. Like, describe your algorithm in 2 sentences. Once you do that, take your first sentence and then break it down into like 3 sub-sentences. and when I say sentences, I like writing them out in comments, and then I can fill in the code underneath. But then you get more and more detailed until you're actually just writing code, right? But in general, start big, get the broad strokes down, and then you can fill in the details later. Don't get too focused on the details before you get the broad strokes down. Again, don't optimize until you finished with your first pass. Excuse me, until you finish your first pass solution. If statements are taking brackets. If statements should not need any curly braces. Should not even need parentheses, which is a little bit different. But it's funny how these things get ingrained in our head, right? I think before you learn JavaScript, you're probably like thinking curly braces and semicolons and parentheses are unintuitive. Now you get this clean, intuitive Python syntax, and now this seems weird, right? What if students equals target students, that doesn't make sense, even though that's basically English. Okay, getting started with the project. This is a tough one to get started with, because there's so much open-ended code. So I hear that. But step one, like I always say, step one, understanding the problem is going to be the hardest step. If you're doing it right, you should spend the most effort on understanding the problem. If you put in the effort up front, the rest of it will usually not be as difficult. So yeah, and once it gets bigger, planning everything out. So scaling it, that gets to step two, which is coming up with a plan, right? Before you start coding, before you implement new features, think it through first, write it out in comments, get your structure organized, and then the execution of it shouldn't be too bad. And if you get in that cycle, get your first pass done, then you can review, then you can iterate, then you can optimize, but get that first pass done first. I'm hearing a lot of like people jumping around, like I don't know what to focus on. Part of the Uber problem solving framework is about knowing what you need to do at any given time, not getting distracted by optimizing while you're still in the planning phase, and so on. This is Kyle. These are really good. These are really good things to do for in your code reviews, right? This is get your first pass done, use your best judgment, and then when you're talking to your TL, this is a good chance to discuss in class. Like, this is what I thought was the best way. Is there a better way? Your TLs, they may not be expert Python coders. They were formerly students just like you not too long ago, but they have seen a lot of code. Like they've gone through this project before. They've seen the evolution of this. So we're going to be expanding on this later in some of our build week projects. So they've seen all of that. So they can probably help you out with some suggestions on other ways to do things like instance versus class methods and things like that. And if not, these are really good questions to ask in the help channel. You can tag me. I may be in meetings and not get back to you immediately, but I am always open to answering questions. Yeah. So if you have some specific questions, again, if you're going to ask me, the instructor, definitely focus on these, because if it's not, if you ask me like my thing is broken, I need help, I'm probably not going to look at it, just because I don't have 30 minutes to sit and go through the first 3 steps with you. But yeah, if you have a concise question, if you have a very specific thing, like here's how I set up my room class, here's how I set up my player class, here's how I'm doing this interaction, I can give you some feedback on that. Yeah, this is do what you got to do. Part of being a developer is finding out how you develop best. So that will help you out. Dictionary, logic. Yeah, some of this stuff seems like practice. Some of this seems like practice. Yeah, and this is a big thing too. We're problem solving with everything, right? We're giving you tough problems, and we're expecting you to use a problem solving framework with it. So that's what all of our CS is going to be about. Hacky is okay, and then you get a code review, and then you iterate, right? Or sometimes you don't, and that happens in the real world too. That's why you're going to get into your professional jobs. You're going to see the code bases you're working with, and some of it is going to be absolute junk. It's because, just like you, some of this code was written at 3 a.m. on a deadline, after 4 cups of coffee. It's not always the highest quality code. You don't always have time to go back and refactor. Technical debt accrues and accrues and accrues, usually faster than it gets paid off. So this is normal. This is normal. But some of the techniques we're going to be teaching you for that step 4 of review refactor will help you with writing better code. Again, we'll give you the tools to evaluate, is this code good or is this code bad? And when you identify the bad parts, we'll also give you the tools to improve it. But we're in week 1, so we have some time to get into all of that. Okay, breakdown of import from thing, import something. This is just this is a quick one. If you're doing import requests, it'll import the whole library, or like import random will import the whole library. But if you want to do like import random, now you can do like random dot shuffle, random dot shuffle. But if you don't want to do random dot, you can do from random import shuffle. Then now you can just do shuffle, and it from blank import blank just prevents you from having to do this prepending the library. Creating rooms from dictionary rooms seem limited. Will you cover better ways? Not really. You will be implementing a better a procedural generator for your build week project, but we'll save that for build week. Python has state, and the jury's still out. Does it? State. I mean, it has state in that you have your variables. You have what is the state of your variables, right? And then if you change the state of your variable, then you're changing the state of that. I don't know if you're talking about a specific kind of state, like in the Redux sense. I don't know Redux well enough to answer that question. But everything has state, right? Everything has state because it has the current, what are the current variables set at, and when you change it, it changes that. So like your player, in your player class, your player is in the outside room. Now you move, and now your player is in the narrow passageway. So in that way, there's definitely state. I don't know if there's a more specific version that you're asking about. Yeah, curly's just takes habits. Don't let yourself rust with curly braces and semicolons, because you will still need to write JavaScript and Swift. So don't forget those things. But it's good to be able to go back and forth. Like on a daily basis, I personally code Python at Lambda School. I do C#, I do Ruby. I still do some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So at a certain point, more practice you get, the more easy it is to transition between the two. Like learning two spoken languages, right? If you know English and then you know Spanish, it's hard at first to keep them separate, but after you get some practice, it's not too bad to go back and forth. Okay, cool. I think this was really good use of time. I want to. Whoops. This is this. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to open up our Intro to Python 2. Let's take a look at, I want to get timing right. So I'm just going to talk through this briefly, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll jump into that code. The idea is to get basically MVP working, to get our REPL loop working, and our player and room classes working. And then we'll look at some more inheritance examples that will help you for day 2. All right, so understanding the problem. Step 1. First thing we want to do is we want to look through all of our files. We want to make sure we know what we're building. We want to make sure we know what our target is, right? So our first task is to create a REPL. In ADV, we want to fill out our player and room classes in these 2 files. So this is what we're focused on here. Now, we talked through the problem yesterday, so we can go through step 1 quickly, and jump into step 2. So coming up with the plan, subl ADV. Let's open up these 3: subl player, subl room. Okay, we can start with this class player. We'll just do pass for right now. class room, pass for right now. And we also want to import our room and player class. So from player, import player. Okay, clarification. What is room and what is this room? Why is one lowercase and why is one capital? The lowercase one is the name of the file. So this room is actually going to look for a room like this. So room.py. So that's what that first thing is looking for. If you recall in Zen of Python, import this. You'll see the last one says namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. That's actually what these are. This is a namespace. This is a namespace. This is the room namespace. This is a player namespace. You can also call it a library or a module, but that's what that's referring to. Now, this thing we're importing here is the room class. So that's going to be this. So from room, imports room. So from the room file, that's lowercase room, we're importing this room class. Okay, so that's what that's doing. So if we add a few more things, like if we have something that inherits from it, like I don't know, class bedroom, right, which inherits from room. If you were to do this, you would also need to do from room import bedroom. Or you could just imports room, which would import everything. But that's what's going on with these froms and imports. Hopefully that clarifies a little bit more. Would you put a comma after the player and then the name of a method if you only wanted to import that method? I don't think you can import just a single method from a class. You have to import the whole class. But if you want, you could do, I think, like this, bedroom, if you want to import all of these in one line. So I think you can import multiple classes or multiple methods, but I don't think you can import just one class from one method from a player. Yes, Madison, you can absolutely do that. What happens if you name a file, but it's already a module? Good question. I think it will look in order, and I'm not sure what order it looks. But it might look in the current directory first, and then it may look in the module libraries. So like if we do like random.py class random pass. So let's see what happens if we import random. Okay, so it actually gets the built-in first before it imports this. So so that's what happens there. Okay. So any downside to from room import star? The downside is if you have something that shares a name with something else. What I mean by that is, what if we put in our room class, and you shouldn't do this, but I'm saying what if we do class player, which imports from this, right? And then we have a player class here, player, and now we do from room import star, from player import star. Now we're going, who knows which player it's going to import, right? If we create a new player, is it going to create this player or this player? Now, if your code is correct, this should never happen. But also, but it does leave room for overlap, whereas room.room or player.player will not. But I mean, there are cases for that, but I would say that's just the downside. That's just the one downside. You don't always know what's in there, so that's something to be careful of. Import this as that. Yes, you can do this too. Yes, this works. Yeah, Mike, I would say these can all, like, there's cases where I think that can really work. I think it can be confusing, right? You want to think about readability. That's kind of a clever solution, but there's probably a more intuitive way to do it. But not always. And sometimes doing import this as that will be the cleanest way to do it. So in that case, yeah, I would say case by case basis. use these things and think about readability. Because in terms of code, the computer doesn't care, right? That works just fine for the computer. The computer doesn't care what things are named. It actually has it cares more about the memory address, which is internal facing, than any human readable name. So the computer doesn't care. So when you're doing these things, think about the human beings and optimize for readability. File structure is not important. File structure is important. File structure is definitely important. Like for example, I think you cannot run this from down here. Like I think if you try to do Python adv.py, source of adv, I think this will throw an error, or maybe not. Oh yeah, actually that did work. So I take that back. Sometimes I think imports only work if you're in the same directory, but it seemed like it worked okay here. Okay. So here's let's fill out our plan quickly. So our player, we want our player to be able to, we'll do our inits player with name. We'll give our player a name. Player also has attributes current room. Okay, so here's a question, and we'll talk about this after the break. But I'm choosing to say that the current room is a player attribute, right? Now this is saying that we have a player. We have a player named Steve, and Steve is standing in outside the cave entrance, right? This is a player attribute. Now you can put it here, or you could also put it in the room, right? You can say the room has an array of all of the players in the room. So should you store the player's location in the player class? Should you store the player's location in the room class? You could, both will work. It's possible to make both work, but I would say one is better by object-oriented programming principles. We'll put this here for now, and we'll talk about why we chose to put it there. So for our room, we want to say we need N2, S2, E2, W2 attributes. We also want to have title, or we can call it name, and description. And what else do we need to have for the rooms? Maybe we want to have a function to connect them, but I think this is okay. For our REPL, we want to say create basic REPL loop, creates read command, does our read, check if it's NSEW or Q. If so, execute the proper command. Okay, so here's our plan. Here's our basic plan. Did I miss anything? I guess we need to create a player. Create a player. Since we have player name, we can say let's player input their name. And then I think that should be good. Would having multiple players being in the same room make me rethink this? That's a great question, Andrew. That's something that we should take into consideration. Yeah, let's talk about this after the break. Do we miss anything? Yeah, I thought it had to be in the same directory too, but it seemed like it worked. The file you're importing is in the same directory. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yes, file structure can trip you up. Can player go in a direction? Yes. Okay. So good question. Player should be able to move. We'll add a method for that. Okay. So I'll let you think about this stuff. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll get to step 3, which is execute. All right. So I'll see you in 10. All right. Excuse me. That was 10 minutes. So come on and make your way back. And we'll get back into our adventure code. Okay, before we move on, let's take a look at Slido. We have some new questions. I forget, I think some of these we looked at, but how do we decide what is to be an attribute, a class variable? When should we use instant methods versus class methods versus static methods? Now, this is the answer is that there's many ways to do it, right? There's not one single right way. So that's why things like object-oriented programming exist. It's sort of guidelines, it's philosophy, this is a paradigm, right? These are sort of, this is how you should think about it. Not necessarily this is how you need to do it every single time. Like there's many ways, there's many valid ways to do different things. Now, part of computer science is to understand the paradigms, is to be able to weigh the strengths and weaknesses so you can make the best possible decision. Um, in general, you want to be as specific as you can. You want to be as safe and as protected as you can. So, what's a good example of that? Um, you want to use an instance method. An instance method is like referring to an object, right? So like you have a player object. What does the player do? What does the player do? The player has a name, right? Every player has a name. So that's an easy one. That should be a player attribute. Um, a player has a current room. Yeah, is it the player's room or the room holds the players? All right, that's up for discussion. Um, a class variable, that's something that's shared between all players, right? So what's something that's shared between everyone? Maybe their class name, right? Or maybe you can say, I don't know. I can't think of a good example off the top of my head, but something that is shared among all classes would be a class variable. Between all instances of that class is a class variable. Same with methods. Same with static methods. If you want something to apply to all players, do it as a static method. If you want to apply to one, do it as an instance method. And I think class method and static method are the same. How should we be passing and storing data? Depends on what you're doing. Depends on what you're doing. That's a pretty vague question with many possible answers. So if you have as we go through this, if you have a more specific question, like for example, how should I put an item into a room, or how should I have my player pick up items in a room? That's sort of moving data between classes, and the way I would say to do that is to think about it in terms of actual objects, right? Like who is getting, like what is happening when a player picks up an item from a room? What is happening? Um, the room is getting rid of the object. It's going into the player's inventory. Is the player getting something? Is the room losing something? I think if you think about it in terms of those verbs, then you can figure out an intuitive way to pass the data. And again, the computer, as long as it works, the computer doesn't really care. So you're thinking more about what's intuitive for human beings. So that's I think how you should approach most of these kind of questions. Okay, we did this one. TK is problematic for learning Python. You use other resources. OOP is probably throwing everyone who didn't take Java right now. OOP is tricky. Again, we're not going so deep into OOP. Python isn't really built for that. Java is definitely a very, very, very strongly object-oriented programming language with strict versions of encapsulation, abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance, along with virtual interfaces, abstract classes, and things like that, which are all used really heavily. Actually, C# is as well. C# is, like I mentioned before, C# is very close to Java. So if you look at like my block game code, you'll see I have a theme class. This is my abstract theme class, which has some various functions. I have a virtual function here, and then I have like theme 0, which is the default. I have theme 1 with some music data, some colors, right? This is the colors for each theme. So these inherit from that abstract class. So this stuff does really come up in real coding. Now you'll see here, I have things that are protected and public. Again, these are part of actual like encapsulation for object-oriented programming. Python doesn't have a sense of that, but overall the principles still apply. TK is, I think the TK for OOP is not as filled out as the TK for Intro to Python. So definitely make use of outside resources if you can. Ask questions, it's and you should be okay. This is, I mean, using other resources is part of what we're trying to do. We want you to use other resources, right? Because we want you to be able to learn. You're learning to learn. So what happens when you're in your job and you need to learn Vue.js and there's no training kit for Vue, right? You're going to need to figure out how to learn that on your own. So I think this is totally okay, and this is actually what we want you to do. So I think that's okay. Is there a way to utilize switch in Python? No, there is not. This is referring to case and switch, which is a nice way of not having if this, else if this, else if this, else if this. But in Python, you just have to do those ifs and elses, which is functionally the same, but a little bit less clean, which I'm actually surprised about because Python usually has likes to have clean, readable syntaxes like switch. How can I read the object? If you print it, you get this, how to check inside. To do this, you want to define your repr method. That's the double underscored REPR double underscore. And then you define what's the room when you print out the room, what's inside of it. But you'll have to say, like, do you want to print every exit? Do you want to print the title, the description, things like that. So you will have to define this to print out your rooms. If peak coding hours are late hours of the night, how do you switch that to be productive in a regular day job? That's a really good question. For me, sometimes I would just work at night, right? I would take my work home and work at night. If you're in an office, you still have to be there during the day. But sometimes I was just unproductive and I didn't finish my work, and now I have to go home at night and finish it up there. Not ideal, but it's nice to get that paycheck. So I'm not, I was not one to complain about that. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. You'll figure it out. And once you get into that 9 to 5 rhythm, it's actually a lot easier. You get there, you have your coffee, you chat a little bit, you get some work done before lunch, have lunch, maybe you get a little sleepy, check your email, and then I usually have a pretty good period from like 2 to 4. And then I wind down around the end of the day. But everyone is going to be different. Like that's, but don't worry about that. I think that's one of the easier things to deal with. Are there specific fields where OOP use is preferred to other paradigms? I wouldn't say fields, but I would say depending on the project, you'll want to know this. And even if they're not specifically using object-oriented programming, MVC, you may have heard MVC. I know mobile iOS students use MVC a lot. Web, there's also like Ruby on Rails and Django are MVC frameworks. You've probably heard this before. Like if Angular also does MVC. MVC is very similar to OOP. You have your model, right? Your model is like your classes, your object classes, your data layer. The controller, like if we're looking at our REPL loop, the controller is kind of here, right? The controller is where you take the commands, you parse the commands. The print part is the view. That's what the user sees. So even though this is not really MVC, you can think of like the room class as part of the model, the player class as part of the model. The view and the controller are part of the REPL loop. So you can still think about it in this way. You still want to write intuitive code. You still want to treat your models as objects. So even if you're not specifically saying, I'm going to implement encapsulation here, right? That's still a very, it's a good principle to know, just in terms of writing intuitive code. And this comes into play no matter what you're working on, just working on teams of any kinds. This will be useful. Okay, cool. Did I miss anything? Cool. Kyle posted some good resources. I think this could help. Okay, so we have our code here. We have our plan. We went through step 1. We went through step 2. Let's execute. Let's execute our our code. So first thing we'll want to do is we know what our room class will take, right? We know our room class to initialize will look like this. So that's easy. This is, you can, so something that will come up a lot in CS is everything you need to know you'll be given. That you should still ask questions. But one thing is that it's not always going to be in the spec, right? Or the README. So I think that a lot of people will, I'll read the README and they say, well, it doesn't say how to do this. It doesn't say how to create the player class. It doesn't say how to create the room class, right? Well, actually we do. We tell you how to create the room class here. Now it's not in the spec, it's not in the README, but we're telling you what attributes the room needs to take here. And this is part of the instructions, right? Just because it's not on the front page, you should still recognize that this is telling you how to set up a room class. So with that, we can start with that. We'll need to define our inits like so. Def init self. Make it a little bit bigger. Close this. Init self, and we need to pass in the name and description. We don't need to pass in N2, S2, E2, W2 because those can just default to none. But we still need to define these. We still need to initialize them. So self.name equals name, self.description equals description. Then we can initialize all these to none. N2 equals none. 1, 2, 3, 4, S, E, W. All right. I think that's it. I think that's it. That's good for right now. Okay, our player class. There's no player class here. It doesn't tell us how we need to initialize our player class. But in part of my plan is I said that I want to have the player input their name. So I will do something like player equals player and some name. All right, we'll change this to be inputable, but for right now, we'll just do it like this. So def init self, always need self, and then we'll say name. Self dot name equals none. Okay, we also need to set the current room, right? We need to have the starting room. So maybe when we initialize this, we also want to pass starting room as well, right? Because I saw someone mention this up here. Every player needs to be in a room, right? That's when you create a player, they need to be somewhere. They can't just be nowhere. So we'll also want to initialize it with the starting room here. Why do we need to initialize the directions? Can't they be just assigned when they exist? Yes, you can. You can do that, but I think it's better to do this. We'll see that when we're checking for north 2, south 2, east 2, and west 2s, here we'll be able to do a null check. Otherwise, if we try to check someone's N2, if the attribute has not yet been defined, then we're going to get an error rather than just having it being set to none. There may be a cleaner way to do this, but I think we want to do this for now. If you want a reason for that, we can always look at Zen of Python, import this, and it says explicit is better than implicit somewhere. Explicit is better than implicit. So I would say we're being explicit that there are these 4 directions here that we will one day presumably change to separate values. Yes, has adder works. But I mean, sometimes you'll have an adder, right? Sometimes you'll have, does has adder work if it's none? I forget. But maybe that'll work. But I still think it's good to be explicit to say that we have these 4 attributes that will tell you what the possibilities are. Like if you wanted to add, now you can go up and down. Maybe you can add like up and down explicitly. But open to interpretation. There's many ways to do this. I think this is probably the most clear and the most readable and the most explicit. So I would personally go with this, but I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. Okay, self.player, we'll say self.current room equals starting room. And let's I'm gonna call travel in some direction. And we'll just pass for right now. We'll be able to travel in some direction. Let's say direction. In a direction. Okay. Now let's see. Player some name. We connect these. Let's try running this. Let's try running this. Let's see if we get any errors. So we can run Python 3 ADV. Init, we're missing a starting room. So I think we want to start our people outside. So let's start from here. Okay, no errors. No errors is good so far. So we can also print, let's say, room outside. This should give us some unreadable garbage. Yes. We can define a print method, something like def string. We'll use string instead of repr. Self. And we can do something like print f of, or sorry, not print. We want to return f of room self.name. Let's put a couple new lines and self.description. Okay. Now, if we run this, we can see, cool, outside the cave entrance, north of you, the cave mount beckons. That looks right. What else? We have north of outside should give us the foyer. So we can say, what if we print room.outside.n2? Should give us the foyer room. Yep, foyer or foyer if you prefer. Dim light filters from the south. Dusty passages run north and east. So it looks like our connection worked. Our print room is working. Our player, maybe we can try printing our player name. Print player.name. None. Okay, so that's not working. Player, oops, that's why. And now we have some name. Cool. So that seems to be working. Let's make an input. Let's say our player name will be input, and we'll say, please enter your name. Okay, so now if I name my player Brady, now my player is named Brady. Cool. Foyer. I don't know what that is. French, New Orleans Creole accent, something. Okay. Has adder succeeds with none and returns true. So I feel like, yeah. Has atter. Yeah, I think we'll want to do the none. So otherwise, you'll need to do the has atter and then the none check to see if it's been initialized. With current room. Okay, so let's get to these things now. So our player is working, our rooms are working. Let's create a basic REPL loop. So as we remember from our rock paper scissors, we can do a while true, which will loop forever. Commands cmd equals. Let's just do a squiggle line for our prompt, and we will evaluate our command. If cmd equals n, we can usually I would do the brute force and then skip to the dry method. But since we already did that yesterday, I think we can just go straight into that. So we can say like directions equals n s e w. We can actually make this lower also, so that if you do capital, it will always make it lowercase. If command equals, so if command in directions, make player travel in that direction. Elif CMD equals Q for quits. Break, and we can also print goodbye. If so, execute the proper command, we can delete that. This is quit. Okay. We have our player.travel, so we can say player.travel CMD. Let's print player should travel direction. So this is still a stub. We haven't filled this out yet, but let's just try this out and see if it's working. Whoops. Python 3 ADV. Please enter my name is Brady. Okay. Now I can go north. Player should travel north. That's correct. If I do something like this, okay, we need to do an error command. Else print I did not recognize that command. And if I do Q, I should quit. Goodbye. All right, so it seems like we're on our way. So we have not implemented travel yet. We still need to print out our room, but overall, it seems like we're in decent shape. Would exit work there? Yes, exit would work. Exit would work. And we'd also send in an exit code. I think exit code 1 is probably what we want to do, but I think this should work. Let's try it. Okay. Oops, not that. Python 3 ADV. Cool, cool. If we quit, we get our nice goodbye. Okay. What were we missing? Let's I think when we initialize, we also want to print player dot current room. Okay, and now we're here. Now we're here. Cool. North, south, east, west, quits. Now all we need to do is we need to define this travel method, right? And I think that's all we need for MVP. Let's check this again. Fill out player room classes. Cool. Okay, so player should be able to travel and move in a direction. Now what we want to do is we want to check our current room, right? If we're standing outside and we want to travel north, first thing we need to do is check if our current room has something to the north, right? So we'll want to, there's a few ways we can do this, but what I'm going to do, I'll get rid of this. I want to get next room equals self.current room, right? This is my current room dot get room in direction, and I'm going to pass in direction. So what this is saying is whatever my room is, I'm going to pass it a direction, and I'm going to be able to get that, right? Now this has not been filled out yet. This has not been filled out yet, so maybe I'll even put a note here. Def get room in direction, and pass. Put a note here. To do. Okay. If next room is not none, that means we have a valid room. Then we can say self.current room equals next room. Else prints you cannot move in that direction. Make sense? Okay, so why do we do this? Why do we do this here instead of just doing all of our checks, right? We can do our N2, S2, E2, W2 check here, but I actually feel like that's a room attribute, right? I feel like that's something that's a characteristic of the room. And this is what I mean by thinking about these in terms of actual objects. We want to get a room in any given direction. Is that something that's in the player, right? Kind of, but that's more of an attribute of the room. So I would say that it's a little bit cleaner to have this in the room class. So so now we can do this. Now we can check get room in a direction. We can do something like if direction equals n, return self.n2. 1, 2, 3, 4. elif s e w else return none, just as a safety check. Okay. And I think that should do it. We can clean this up. We'll clean this up afterwards, but let's try running this first. Python 3 ADV. Please enter my name. North of you. Okay, I'm going north, south. That seems like it's working, but I'm not printing out the directions. So maybe I should, so we can, after we move, we can print self.room, right? Self.current room. And I want to put a new line here. Quits. Brady. North of me, the cave mount beckons. I go north. Now I'm in the foyer. Dim light filters in from the south. Dusty passages run north and east. North, a steep cliff appears before you, falling into the darkness on the grand overlook. North cannot move north. South, yes. East, north. So it looks like it's working. So this is MVP. So before we move on, before we go on to our fourth step, which is to reflect, which is to make improvements and refactor our code, are there any questions about anything we have done so far? What just happened? We hit MVP. That's what happened. Sure. Okay, so what did we do? We came up with our plan. If you remember, we figured out what our room class should have been here. We came up with an outline for a basic REPL loop, including read, including parsing the commands, including quit. We filled out our player class, right? Our player has a name. Some of these, all right, we can start to delete these comments now, right? Because player has an attribute current room. That's what we're saying here. So this comment actually does not tell us anything. We can add a little bit of white space for nice formatting. Player should be able to move in a direction. So here we're grabbing the next room. If the next room is valid, we set our current room to that room and we print out that room. Otherwise, we print an error message. Yes, that is coming from here, from this string method. You might remember this from early assignments, but string or repr will print out, here's the name, here's some new lines, here's the description. I actually want to do string because string, if you remember that Stack Overflow, is to be human readable, and that's what I feel like is going on here. Repr is to be unambiguous, so repr is not giving everything. Repr should give you. Repr is more technical, and string is more, I think, user-facing. So that's the distinction that I use in my head. And I think this is going to be user-facing. So when you want to print out the room as a string, it should have the name and the description. We also, I would also probably want to have some functionality to show me what are the valid directions from any given room. Like, yes, it's outlined in the description, but I think just for usability, we'll also want to show the exits. But we'll add that. We'll add that in our next pass. And what else? Room class. So we have N2E to S2W2. Again, maybe there's a cleaner way to do this, but it allows us to make this really clean function. Get room and direction, which will allow us to do this. And actually, there's an even cleaner way to do this using what am I saying? Using get_attr and has_attr. So we'll refactor to clean this up a little bit after that. Okay. Before we move on, let's take a look at this. Self.currentRoom equals starting room, right? All right, we're setting our current room to this. We're storing the player's location in this current room. Okay. Versus, is that a room? Is that a room method? Get rid of this. So what I mean by that is, why not do self.players equals a list, right? Why not store this? Why not store this in a list here? Does that make sense? So what we're saying is, are we saying the player is in a room, or are we saying the room contains these players, right? That's a subtle difference. Is the player in a room, or does a room contain players? Now you can do both. You can do both, but that can lead to errors. That can lead to desynchronization. Very often you'll just want to put it in one place. Yes, because you can have multiple players in a room if multiplayer. True. Okay. What I would say is that it makes more sense to have the player store their current room rather than the room storing current player. Now, why is that? Now let's imagine a scenario where we have 500 rooms and let's say 10 players. Okay. Now each player is in a room. I think this is kind of realistic. Each player is in a room, right? And each player should have a display of their current room. Now let's say the player, each room has a list of players, right? Room dot players equals, let's say, player 1, player 2, player 3. Okay. Now, if we do this, every time I walk into a room, I should see a list of all the players that are in that room, right? Now, in order to do that, I'll need to take my room, and yes, it's nice that we have this list of players. But what if I need to do this, right? What if I need to access my own current room? What if I need to say what is to the north of my current room? If I'm not storing this here, so if I don't have self.currentRoom, what I'll need to do is I'll need to look through every room to see which room contains me. Does that make sense? So if I'm in room 3, and I want to see what's to the north of my current room, I'll need to say, room 1, am I in room 1? No. Room 2, am I in room 2? No. Room 3, am I in room 3? Yes, I'm in room 3. So now I can see what's to the north of room 3, right? That doesn't seem too bad, but what if I'm in room 500? Then I need to check 1, am I in room 1? No. 2, am I in room 2? No. 3, am I in room 3? No. All the way till you get to 500. Now let's consider the opposite. Like now let's say we're storing only self.currentRoom, and we don't have self.players. Now if I'm in this room and I want to see all of the players who are in my room, I can do a search that will say, give me all the players. We have to walk through each of these 10 players. Tell me each of their current rooms. Like, are you in my room? Are you in this room? Are you in this room? Are you in this room? And it's usually less. It's usually going to be less. The number of players you have for any given game will probably be less than the number of total rooms in the game. Right? Now that's not always the case, but it will generally be the case. And there's tricks that we're going to talk about next week where you can index the current room, which will make the search pretty efficient and not have to do a linear search. But overall, it makes more sense, I think, to do it like this. And this is related to database design as well. If you have a many-to-one relationship, meaning a room can have many players, but a player can only be in one room, right? That's a many-to-one relationship. A room has many players. A player only is in one room at a time. The way you do it is through what's called a foreign key. That's saying that you have self.currentRoom. You store the thing that's the one stores a reference to the thing that has the many. So and then you can just do a search to say, all right, give me all players where current room equals this room's ID. Right? Like if this was room ID 10, you say, give me all players where current room equals 10. And that's pretty efficient as long as you're indexing this column. So that's a pretty subtle distinction. And actually, when we get to items, you may want to change this to say like self.items equals a list. Actually, this is how I would do it. But in a database, in an actual database, you'll want to do something. You'll want to put your items also using a foreign key, like so. Are there any questions about that? I know that's a lot of big words. Some foreign concepts, especially if you're not full stack web. Some of these concepts may be a little bit foreign, but this is just sort of a framework. Again, there's no single one size fits all right answer. This is how I would recommend it for some various reasons. It's a discussion, right? And it's about working on a team and making sure that everybody understands what's going on. Yeah, and Mike, we're going to get into, you're going to actually be porting this to a database when you get to your CS build weeks. So we'll have a chance to take this local Python project and put it on a web server, so you can explore those concepts and relate object-oriented programming to MVC and see how the concepts all interlock. Can't you just do both? John, you can do both, but it's a little bit of a waste of space, and it can also lead to desynchronization, right? Like what happens if the player is in a room and then the room does not have the player? That's possible. That will happen. And then it could lead to really ugly things. So it's usually better to just store that information in one place. Now that's not always the case. When you get into things like MongoDB or a NoSQL database, which is basically just big JSON blobs, then sometimes you will want to have redundancy. But then you'll need to build in systems to correct for redundancy, and that can get messy itself. Okay. Can you explain foreign key one more time? Yes. Okay, so if we have, let's say we have room 1, 2, 3, and we have players 2, 3, 4, right? You can say either room 1 dot players equals, a foreign key would say if a player is in a room, like let's say players 2 and 3 are in room 2, player 4 is in room 1. You would say player 2 dot room ID equals, I forgot what I said. Room ID, this would be player 3, player 4 equals 2 and 1. You would do something like this, right? This is how you would say that the players are in a room. Now, if you're in room 2 and you want to get all of the players that are in room 2, like let's say to print out to player 3's console, all of the players that are in the room, you would do a query like return all players where, or like gets all players where room ID equals 2, and that would return these two players. So that's a foreign key relationship. That's a foreign key relationship, which is used for a many to one association. All right, how are we doing on time? We have about 13 minutes left. All right, so let's see. What did we want to improve? First thing I want to do is I want to improve my formatting a little bit. This is a little bit ugly, I think, just in terms of like visual design. I think I want a little bit more white space. So for my room class, I'm gonna throw in a new line here. North, south. Okay, that's a little bit better. Maybe I'll want to do something like oops, just put in some lines to make it a little nicer. I don't know if that was better. Maybe I'll put in another line here. All right, that looks a little bit better to me. That looks a little bit better. And then I also want to put the exits. So something like def get exits string self. So what I want to do is, if you can go north, I want to have, or south, I want to have a something that shows me the valid directions. So I will say, we can do this in one line. Return f exits to the, I will do a join with a comma, dot join, self dot get exits. I'll do def get exits self. And this will be, we can do this like brute force. Exit equals list. If self dot n2, you can say is not none, or you can just say if self dot n2. I think this will also work. Exits dot append n 1 2 3 4 s s e w e w return exits. Okay, let's test this out. Self.get exit string. This is getting a little ugly. I think we probably want to break this up into some new lines. But let's do this for now. Oops, return F. I think this needs to be a single quote. Okay, north. I have an exit to the north. Exit to the north, southeast, north, south. Cool. So this is a little bit better. I want a new line here. Exit to the north, east, north, south. Cool. Okay, so this is looking a little bit more intuitive. I'll probably want to break this up here. We'll do string equals this string plus we'll call this display string to make it a better name. Display string plus equals this. Display string plus equals this. We'll divide this here. Self.get exit string. Okay, cool. Okay, so see how I divided this up? So everything is kind of in a row. Like we have these new lines at the beginning, at the end, and we have exactly what's going to be here. Now this is, you usually don't want to concatenate strings like this because it's inefficient. But in this case, we're going to choose inefficiency because it makes this more readable, because this makes it much more readable. So now we should get the same thing here. North, south, east. And it's very intuitive that first we do a line, now we do the name of the room, we do the description, then we do the exit string. Exit for exit in, that could work too. That could work too. Michael, I like that a lot. I think that could work as well. Let's see. We can also do. Okay, I think this is okay for now. I think the last thing maybe we want to do is we could refactor this to use has atter or get atter. But I forget how that works actually. I'm gonna have to Google that. Has attr Python. Python has attr. You take an object, you take a name, and will return true if the string is the name of one of the object's attributes, false if not. Maybe we can do get attr instead. Is that better? Get attr will return the value of the named object. What happens if there's no, what if it doesn't exist? Attribute error if it doesn't exist. Okay, so I think maybe we can say if has attr of this needs to be self, right? Or self and f direction 2 return get attr. Okay. Oh, sorry. Return get attr self direction 2. Else return none. I think this should work. Let's try this. North, south, northeast. Okay, cool. Looks like it works. Looks like it works. Always nice when things work the first time. Now, I don't know if this is more readable or if this is more readable. This is a little bit more explicit, but this is a little bit more concise. I think this is not too. This is fairly intuitive, even though it's a little bit harder to parse than something like this. I think that this is okay. Try and catch raising exceptions could work as well, but in general, I would try to make your stuff safe as much as possible. The problem, Andrew, the problem with try and catch is that sometimes you want your code to break if something is wrong, and because it'll tell you what's going on. And sometimes catching too many general exceptions will catch bugs that are broken in the wrong way. So sometimes it's good to have your code break because then it tells you that something needs to be fixed. And I think we could do a similar thing here, but I'll leave that to you all as an exercise. Okay. What other? We're almost out of time, so I think this is pretty good. I'll drop these into Slack for your reference. But last thing, let's just check to see if there's anything new in Slido. Can you pause after I finish typing something? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I know I move pretty quickly sometimes, but my thought is that we're gonna drop this into Slack. There's always the recording that you can go back and watch. Yeah, I know we move fast, and I think I would tend towards moving faster and letting you go back and review it, and trying to get through all of the stuff we want to go through, instead of the other way. I know it can be hard to keep up with, but that's something that I think that hopefully you'll be able to work with as we go through. But let still keep the feedback coming. I think it's something I always try to be conscious of to slow down a little bit and make sure that people are absorbing. Should you be able to create methods on objects rather than writing functions in the adv.py file? Yes. As much as possible, you want to keep all of your code here. Now, if in MVC, we talked about how this is sort of similar to an MVC framework. What is MVC? MVC is like OOP in that it's a guideline. It's a philosophy. It's saying that you can put this functionality in the view, in the controller, or in the model, but there's probably a way you should put it. Now, one saying that you might hear is when it comes to MVC is you want fat models and skinny controllers. We can talk a little bit more about that's a pretty deep topic, but the reason for that is that often when you're developing, your controllers get super huge, and you can already see from here. This is clean. This is a super clean, but you can see if we did brute force for every direction, right? if command equals north, do this. If command equals south, do this. If command equals q, do this. Now we do get and drop, and we just keep adding commands and adding commands. And if we put too much logic in this while loop is going to become humongous. So as much as possible, you want to put, if your player is the one traveling, you want to put the logic in the model. That's what MVC is saying. You want to put that in the model. You want your model to be fat. You want your player to have a lot of capabilities. You want your room to have a lot of capabilities. And you want to keep the control layer just very, very lightweight. Accept an input, route it to the right place. Accept an input, route it to the right place. Your controller should not be doing any of that heavy lifting. And certainly you don't want to do that in the view code. What that means is, like, for web people or mobile people, like you want to do all the processing as close to the model layer as possible, not on like a JavaScript, like when you click the submit button, it triggers something. So yes, as much as possible, you want to put your functionality as low level as possible. I don't get how to reference items as a list. So if that's, you mean if you put like in your rooms, self.items equals none. Now you just reference this list as a regular Python list, and then you can search through them. Now the tricky thing is that this is going to be filled with items. So as you're implementing your get and drop classes for this stuff, you will need to write some code to search by name. You're going to need to search through a list of objects by name, which can be a little bit tricky. But that's part of the challenge of what we're doing for your assignment. So if you get stuck with this, ask your TLs. They've gone through this as well. Go check out the help channel, and you should be good. Command line programming. I think this is just the print. I think that's just the print. It's here our prints are kind of mixed up, so it's not strictly MVC. But I think if you were to make this more scalable, you wouldn't want to scatter your prints around either. Last thing I want to say, sprint challenges tomorrow at 8 a.m. Maybe a while since you've done these sprint challenges, just coming from labs. But yes, sprint challenge will be from 8 to 11 a.m. We'll be dropping that link at 8. And then at 12 noon, we'll have an instructor hour where I'll come. You can ask me anything. We can talk about Python. We can talk about CS. We can talk about algorithms next week. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. And yeah, I think that is about it. How do you submit your sprint challenge? You can talk to your TL about that. The flow changes here and there, so I think your TL or your SL definitely will have the most up-to-date information on that. But as far as I know, it should be pretty similar to how you're submitting your homework. Remember, sprint challenge, so no working together. These should be individual assignments. You can ask questions, but please don't share code in public channels. If you need to share code, DM your TL privately, and they'll help you out as much as needed. It's okay to ask questions. You may not get an answer if you're asking a question that's part of the challenge, but it's always okay to ask those questions as long as you don't share code. Remember, that's part of our problem solving process. That's something we expect you to use, and so of course it is okay in CS to ask questions for your sprint challenge. Do you need to worry about the challenge? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's not too bad, especially if you're able to get through the Python stuff. But if you're able to build your MVP here, I think you should be okay. If you were able to, some hints to study, list comprehensions. Make sure you have an understanding of Python inheritance. It's not too complicated. Like, you don't need to know the in-depth everything and abstract classes and things like that, but just know how to do basic hierarchies, understand what's going on when something inherits from something else. And I think you should be fine. This sprint challenge isn't too bad. There may be some things that you don't know how to do, but just like in Intro to Python 1, you can absolutely use Google to look those things up, and you should be okay. This one is this challenge, I would say, is more straightforward than some of the following challenges, which will get a little bit trickier. So But I think the tricky part of this is we know that you've only been doing Python for a few days. So make good use of Google, make good use of Stack Overflow, and I think you'll be okay. All right. That's about it for today. Good luck tomorrow, and good luck with the rest of your assignments. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 12. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I'll see you.